You think waterboarding is bad? Wait until you hear what they did to suspected terrorists in the 14th century. Picture this. A man is strapped to a wooden frame, his mouth forced open with iron prongs, and then slowly, deliberately, they pour a mixture of vinegar bile and rotting fish oil down his throat until his stomach swells like a pregnant woman about to burst. But here's the twisted part. They don't let him vomit. They seal his lips with hot wax and wait for the gases to build, for the acids to eat through his stomach lining, for the screams to turn into gurgles. This wasn't some fiction. This was a documented method used in parts of medieval Europe against anyone accused of conspiring with Moorish invaders. They called it the swelling, and the victims? They rarely lasted more than 3 days before their organs literally ruptured from the inside out. The executioners would place bets on how long each man could hold before his belly split open like overripe fruit. Now, you might be thinking, surely modern terrorism brought more humane endings, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Because when you look at how some of the world's most notorious terrorists actually died, you'll realize that sometimes justice comes wrapped in agony, and sometimes it comes wrapped in your own desperate choices. Let's start with a man who knew his death was coming every single day of his miserable life. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the founding father of ISIS, lived like a paranoid rat in a cage he built himself. This wasn't some movie villain confidently planning world domination from a luxury bunker. Imagine that. Every night, lying down to sleep with explosives strapped to your chest, knowing that any moment could be your last, that any sound outside could be the Americans coming for you. He traveled only in darkness, disguised as a shepherd, crossing deserts like some biblical figure fleeing God's wrath. His inner circle shrank to almost nothing because everyone around him kept dying in increasingly spectacular ways. By late 2019, his empire was crumbling faster than a sandcastle in a hurricane, and intelligence agencies finally pinned him down in a compound in northwest Syria. Here's where it gets interesting. To reach him, American forces had to coordinate with Russia and Turkey, 3 nations who normally wouldn't trust each other to hold a door open, all agreeing that this one man needed to die that badly. The night they came for him, helicopters sliced through Syrian airspace like mechanical angels of death. Special forces landed, and the assault began with the kind of precision that only comes from months of planning and millions of dollars in training. Inside, Baghdadi did exactly what everyone expected. He ran. He scrambled into a tunnel like the cornered animal he'd become, dragging 2 of his own children with him as human shields or perhaps as companions for his final journey into oblivion. Here's the part that should make your skin crawl. He knew that tunnel was a dead end. He'd been in that compound long enough to know every corner, every escape route, and he chose that tunnel anyway. Why? Because he'd rather die on his own terms than face capture. Military dogs pursued him into the darkness, their snarls echoing off stone walls, and in those final seconds, with nowhere left to run and the sounds of American soldiers closing in, he did what he'd been preparing to do for years. He detonated the suicide vest he was wearing. The blast was powerful enough to collapse part of the tunnel, to obliterate his body so completely that they had to use DNA testing to confirm his identity. And those 2 children he brought with him, they were vaporized alongside him, their small bodies turned to fragments by their father's final act of cowardice disguised as defiance. But Baghdadi's death, as gruesome as it was, came relatively quickly. Some terrorists weren't so fortunate. Take Abu Nidal, a Palestinian militant whose name alone was enough to make European airport security break into cold sweats during the 1980s. This man had orchestrated hijackings, assassinations, and bombings across 2 continents, building a reputation as one of the most ruthlessly efficient killers in the terrorist world. By 2002, though, his power had evaporated like morning dew in Baghdad's summer heat. He was living quietly, almost anonymously under Saddam Hussein's protection, probably thinking he'd escaped the consequences of decades of bloodshed. Wrong. Again. In August of that year, Iraqi intelligence officers showed up at his apartment. The official story sounds almost civilized. They came to arrest him, he asked to change clothes, went into his bedroom, and a single gunshot rang out. Self-inflicted wound to the head, case closed, right? Except nothing about Abu Nidal's death was that simple. Other accounts paint a far darker picture, one involving multiple gunshot wounds, an 8-hour struggle in a hospital, and photographs that didn't quite match the narrative. Palestinian sources whispered that Saddam himself had ordered the execution, fearing that Abu Nidal might become a liability with American invasion looming on the horizon. Another version claimed Iraqi intelligence had raided his home after discovering documents about a potential U.S. attack, that a firefight erupted between his bodyguards and Iraqi officers, and that in the chaos, Abu Nidal caught bullets from both sides. Then there's the truly paranoid version, that he'd been working as a spy for Kuwait and Egypt, indirectly feeding information to the Americans, and that Iraqi interrogators were questioning him when things went fatally wrong. The truth? We'll probably never know. What we do know is that his body was found with wounds inconsistent with suicide, that the medical reports contained contradictions, and that Saddam's regime had every reason to want him dead before he could be captured by coalition forces and start talking. So, whether Abu Nidal shot himself in a moment of cornered desperation, was executed by Iraqi intelligence, or died in a shootout that the government later tried to sanitize, one thing remains certain: his death was neither quick nor clean, and the man who'd spent decades dealing in terror died drowning in it himself. Now, let's talk about a death so precise, so surgically calculated, that it sounds like science fiction, except it's absolutely real. Ayman al-Zawahiri, Osama bin Laden's right hand, and later the leader of al-Qaeda, managed to survive for over 2 decades after September 11th. Think about that. More than 20 years of being the world's most wanted man, of dodging drone strikes and special forces raids, of appearing in grainy videos just often enough to prove he was still breathing. Multiple times, intelligence agencies celebrated his death, only for him to resurface months later like some kind of immortal horror movie villain. But by early 2022, his luck was running thin as spider silk. U.S. intelligence discovered he'd moved into a house in Kabul's Sherpur neighborhood, one of the wealthiest districts in the city. Not hiding in a cave in the Hindu Kush, not buried in some remote mountain compound, but living in an upscale neighborhood in the heart of the Afghan capital. For months, American surveillance teams studied his routines with the patience of scientists observing a particularly dangerous specimen. They noticed he had a habit, almost a compulsion really, of stepping onto his balcony. Maybe he liked the fresh air, maybe he was arrogant enough to think he was untouchable. Whatever the reason, that balcony became his death sentence. The intelligence went straight to the White House, where President Biden spent weeks wrestling with the decision. The problem wasn't whether to kill Zawahiri, it was how to do it without turning a crowded residential neighborhood into a crater. Standard missiles were out of the question, because they'd level half the block and slaughter dozens of civilians. So they chose a weapon that sounds like it was designed by a sadistic engineer with a dark sense of humor. The R-9X Hellfire missile, nicknamed the Flying Jinsu. This thing doesn't explode. Instead, it deploys 6 rotating blades just before impact, turning itself into a 100-pound metal blender traveling at the speed of sound. The idea is to kill the target through direct impact and shredding rather than explosion, theoretically leaving everyone nearby unharmed. Theoretically. At sunrise on July 31, 2022, a CIA drone hovering somewhere in the Afghan sky fired 2 of these missiles at Zawahiri's balcony. The 71-year-old terrorist was standing outside, probably enjoying his morning routine, completely unaware that 2 spinning death machines were screaming toward him at supersonic speed. The missiles struck with the kind of precision that only billion-dollar military technology can achieve. Zawahiri died instantly, or at least that's the official story. But think about what instantly means when you're hit by a missile designed to slice you apart. The impact alone would have been enough to pulverize bones and rupture organs, and then those blades deployed, turning flesh and bone into something resembling what you'd find in a butcher's grinder. The building remained standing. His family inside the house was reportedly unharmed, but on that balcony, where Zawahiri had been standing seconds before, there was nothing left but blood, fragments, and the kind of carnage that forensics teams have nightmares about. President Biden addressed the nation the next day, delivering that classic line: "Justice has been delivered. This terrorist leader is no more." What he didn't mention was the grotesque efficiency of the weapon they'd used, or the fact that they'd essentially pureed a human being on his own balcony. But at least Zawahiri's death was quick, even if it was horrific. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi wasn't nearly so fortunate. This Jordanian extremist made Baghdadi look like an amateur. Zarqawi was the man who personally beheaded hostages on camera, who organized suicide bombings that turned marketplaces into slaughterhouses, who killed with such enthusiasm that even other al-Qaeda leaders told him to tone it down. He had a particular obsession with murdering Shia Muslims, something that even Osama bin Laden found strategically stupid and morally questionable. The United States put a $25 million bounty on his head, making him one of the most expensive targets in the war on terror. For years, he slipped through their fingers like smoke, always one step ahead, always surrounded by fanatics willing to die protecting him. Then a captured member of his network broke under interrogation and gave up information that led to a safe house near Bakba, Iraq. When intelligence confirmed Zarqawi was inside, 2 F-16 fighter jets received orders to level the building. They dropped 2 500-pound guided bombs, precision weapons designed to turn structures into rubble and people into paste. The explosions tore through the house, collapsing walls, pulverizing furniture, and killing most people inside instantly. Most, but not all. When American and Iraqi troops arrived to search the debris, they found Zarqawi still alive. Badly wounded, yes. Bleeding from massive injuries, absolutely. But conscious and aware enough to recognize what had happened. Witnesses said he tried to move, actually attempted to roll off the stretcher when soldiers restrained him. Imagine surviving 2 500-pound bombs, being pulled from the rubble with your insides turning to soup, and still having enough fight left to resist the soldiers trying to help you. The autopsy later revealed a massive chest wound and catastrophic damage to his lungs from the blast pressure. Medical experts estimated it took him nearly an hour to die, slowly drowning in his own blood while lying on that stretcher, every breath a struggle, every heartbeat pumping more blood into his chest cavity. Rumors started immediately. An Iraqi witness claimed American soldiers beat him while he lay dying, that they took revenge for all the Americans he'd killed. The military denied it, insisted their medics tried to save him, but who really knows? When you've spent years hunting a man who's personally responsible for thousands of deaths, who's beheaded innocents on camera and laughed about it, how much effort would you really put into saving his life? Maybe they did try. Maybe they didn't try very hard. Either way, Zarqawi spent his final hour on Earth experiencing exactly the kind of slow, agonizing death he'd inflicted on countless others. And there's a certain poetic justice in that, isn't there? His body was eventually identified through fingerprints and DNA, but by then the images of his corpse had already spread across the internet. His face bruised and swollen, his eyes staring at nothing. A final monument to the fact that eventually, violently, inevitably, gravity comes for everyone who builds their empire on blood.